Thanks. Okay, thanks, Cassie. And please feel free to like wave or something if I start to not be loud enough. Okay, well, thanks everyone for being here today. Like Cassie said, I'm going to talk about the Clean Water SRF non-point program. So we'll just start with the first slide. Next slide. So I'll give just a brief overview of the state revolving fund, kind of non-point, point versus point source projects, and then get into kind of what we're offering currently in terms of loans via our general non-point source program. So state revolving fund, all states have one. Essentially, the EPA gives a grant to um, the state program, and then the state then invests that grant into a revolving loan fund. So they make um, uh, money off the interest on those loans and get the principal back. So that it's a growing fund, and then um, Iowa also leverages its funds via bond proceeds, etc. So that's where the money comes from and how it grows. Uh, Next slide. So not all states have a non-point SRF program. Many do, and Iowa is one of those. And in the SRF world, we distinguish between our point source and non-point source projects based on the definition of a treatment work. So we consider a project point source if it meets the Section 212 of the Clean Water Act definition of a treatment works. And all of those treatment works projects are subject to federal requirements such as Davis-Bacon, American Iron and Steel, and environmental review. In Iowa, non-point projects are not subject to Davis-Bacon, American Iron and Steel, and environmental review, but we do have several cross-cutters that you do have to comply with. There's typically not a large cost associated with them. So that's our, equal opportunity posting and things like that. So just want to so just going over that because that's why it's important for us to know if we're dealing with a non-point source project or maybe connecting to something that could be considered a treatment works project. And then we have a variety of funding mechanisms that we can use to address our non-point source projects. Next slide. Those funding mechanisms are for the general non-point source program, we can do direct loans or loan participation. Direct loans go to our public entities. Loan participation are for nonprofit entities. Link deposits are for private landowners. And then sponsored projects was kind of a special funding mechanism where communities with a treatment works project could do a interest rate reduction via a loan amendment. And that's how you got a sponsored project. Next slide. But again, we're going to be focusing on direct loans to public entities, which I'm going to call the GNS program. I don't know when we started using the acronym MPS for non-point source. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. It can be very confusing. But we are calling this program the GNS Direct Loan Program for general non-point source. All right, next slide. So the purpose of the Clean Water State Revolving Fund GNS Loan Program is to provide financial assistance to support Iowa's water quality goals. Eligible projects implement the state's current non-point source management plan. And eligible applicants are those that are public entities that are able to issue a bond and are owners of record of the property, the project site, or can demonstrate legal control of the site via 28E or easement. So that is who is eligible for the opportunities we're talking about today. Next slide. So essentially every aspect of the project is eligible for the loan financing. Um, We do expect communities to work with the municipal advisor and bond council and the Iowa Finance Authority to determine early in the process, um, if this funding mechanism is right for the community. There's also an opportunity to get planning and design loans. If a community is interested in that, those are 0% loans, 0% interest loans for up to 3 years. And then any loan proceeds that are not used for planning and design can be rolled into this GNS loan, but they do not have to be. You can get a planning and design loan and then not use SRF for the actual project. It just has to be it just has to be for an SRF eligible project. And so, like I said, almost all expenses are included. Um, Legal and engineering fees, land acquisition and easements, all construction costs, vegetation establishment up to 3 years after construction can be included in your loan costs, loan fees, etc. Okay, next slide. So to be considered an eligible project, the proposed project and plans really just have to demonstrate a water quality improvement. So projects must address a source of pollution or prevent a source of pollution. And I'm going to show you several examples of eligible projects. The first here being stream stabilization, which we consider a water quality improvement if you can demonstrate it will prevent erosion and sediment transport downstream. Next slide. We also like to fund stormwater wetlands. Here's an example of a wetland that serves as both a water quality improvement and a community amenity. So you can see they've incorporated the stormwater wetland into a green space. Next slide. We also fund a lot of bioretention cells by themselves, but also in conjunction with permeable pavers. So here's a picture. Yep, there's some pavers, and I think those two practices really work well together to manage stormwater when you have a lot of impervious surfaces. Yeah, there's maintenance involved, but again, we can help you with those establishment costs for maintaining biocells for the first 3 years. And we also have a lot of knowledge about maintaining our pavers that we've developed over the years. Next slide. Something new that we have been funding mostly in Johnston, but a lot of communities are starting to implement regenerative stormwater conveyance, which is kind of like, I would say kind of like stream stabilization, but on a gully or ephemeral stream or intermittent stream. So that's what we're showing here is a regenerative stormwater conveyance system in Clive. Next slide. Also native landscaping, either in and around another practice or in and of itself is a great water quality improvement practice. So we're showing here some native landscaping they did in the Amana colonies. Next slide. Okay, so currently today you could take out a GNS loan at the current SRF interest rate. And that interest rate will by law be lower than the current market rate. SRF interest rate used to be 1.75 all the time, but they've recently made it change quarterly to be 75% of the BVALs, the Bloomberg average interest rate for the last quarter. The duration of the loan is determined by the useful life of the practice, usually 10 or 20 years. The loan amount can cover up to 100% of eligible costs, no minimum or maximum loan amount, and no early repayment penalty. Okay, next slide. So that's what is offered today. Starting September 1st, you can submit applications that will then be due December 1st for what we're calling special purpose funds, or our SFY 2025 incentive program. And that opportunity is a 0% interest on the first $500,000 borrowed for the project. And then you can still get a loan for costs above $500,000 that will be at the current SRF interest rate. So here's where you can find the current SRF interest rate at that website. I looked at it yesterday and it is 2.5%. Next slide. So with this new incentive program, we're also rolling out a scoring system for projects. So there's a total of 20 points possible, which are broken down here. The scoring system is published in the current IUP. It's also in our application instructions. And I'll go over the first three categories here in this presentation. And currently we have published in the IUP that to be eligible to receive the incentive funds, you need to get a score of 11 or greater to receive that 0% incentive. Next slide. So what we're looking for in our applications is evidence of a water quality impact, and that can be mitigation or prevention of a identified pollutant. Other factors include the size of the drainage area, volume of water treated, effectiveness of the practice at improving infiltration, slowing water down, and treatment or removal of pollutants. You may or may not use models to calculate pollutant load reductions. That will augment your application, but it's not necessary. Next slide. So the program recommends that applicants work with a technical advisor to develop their project plans. For most of our urban practices, that's going to be our IDLS urban conservation team, but we can also look to other subject matter experts depending on the project. Design standards are available for most eligible practices to maximize their effective design. So anything in the Iowa Stormwater Management Manual. And we also recommend, if you're on a perennial stream, using the Iowa River Restoration Toolbox. But other standards can be used, NRCS Field Office technical guides, even other state standards can be pointed to. But what we're looking for here is evidence that the project has been designed to an established standard and or on sound guidance provided by a technical advisor. Okay, and then next slide. And then we're also looking at the degree of project readiness with the application. So is there a demonstrated ability to implement the project or practice in an efficient manner? If you get funding, are you ready to go, or at least advance quickly through the design process? So we're looking for, are you at design concept or further? Do you have a realistic timeline, realistic budget? Have you demonstrated legal control of the site, or have a plan to demonstrate legal control of the site? And does the applicant and consultant have an understanding of local, state, and federal permit requirements? Next slide. So we do know it's a challenge to get these water quality practices paid for by cities. And what we're recommending here is maybe using this loan to match or stack other funding sources. So SRF loans may be used to match local, state, or federal grants. So maybe you could use the loan to match your WQI urban grant or community foundation grant, etc. And something like a low interest loan or a no interest loan is often a lower cost than issuing bonds or the cost of postponing construction um, to till a later date. So it can actually be cheaper in the long run to take out a loan, a 0% interest loan today, rather than saving to construct your project, 10, 20 years down the line when um, it would be a more expensive project. Next slide. So our program really hopes to eliminate barriers to communities to access financing for these projects. The process that we've outlined is a pre-application consultation. That's just a phone call with DNR and a technical advisor, the consultant, and the applicant. You then submit an application. That application is scored by DNR. Once it is scored, it goes to the goes on the intended use plan and project priority list to be approved by the Environmental Protection Commission. Once it is reviewed and hopefully approved by the EPC, then we go further along into design. And then once we get to final designs, we issue eligibility letter, go to bid letting, and then construction. Next slide. So I'll just give you an example of two kinds of projects that we, can highlight all of the types of things that you can do with this type of funding. So here I'm showing a Wakan's sponsored project, so that was a WQI grant that was paired with a sponsored project funds. And I really love this project because it pretty much uses all of the practices to create a true treatment train. So this is Wakan City Park. They had this stormwater wetland was placed in I think it was previously agriculture, but it definitely drains. I think I want to say 40 acres of agricultural. Anyway, it comes under the road. Agricultural runoff comes under the road through a culvert, snakes through that stormwater wetland. You got a lot of treatment capacity right there. It then flows out under the road, and it used to run down the road and would flood the road and prevent people in that campground from they'd essentially be trapped in the campground. And then there was a lot of erosion issues along the road and down to Indian Springs Pond. That picnic area would get flooded. So what they did is they installed permeable pavers along the road that ended in treatment in a bioretention cell, as well as installed some check dams along a ditch that was quickly eroding along the Lois Road. And then they installed some native plants along that road. All of these practices of which prevented flooding and transport of potential pollutants from those impervious surfaces and to Indian Springs Pond and the downstream Paint Creek. Next slide. And then some other projects we've been using this funding mechanism for are ravine stabilizations in Johnston. So they have many of these. They sit on the bluff over Saylorville Lake, and they have a lot of ravines draining to the lake that are rapidly eroding due to stormwater outlets, stormwater pipes that are essentially perched as the ravines erode, and that problem just gets more and more severe. So what they have done, next slide, is installed kind of a combination of drop structures like you might see kind of that have been used in like maybe gully stabilization, along with kind of regenerative conveyance principles using check dams. So you're looking downstream at a ravine that's been stabilized here. So buried underground where this photo was taken is a drop structure that then outlets to this kind of gravel bed and then flows downstream into another like gravel pool riffle structure. Next slide. And that's it. So, those are just a few of the projects that we have done. Happy to take any questions, either now or please feel free to contact me via email or phone.
Thank you, Julie. If you have any questions for our presenters today, please type them in the chat and I will read them. And also, like Julie said, if you want to reach out to them later, that's totally fine too. I do have one question. Are watershed plans required to participate in this program?
They are not required. No, I would definitely refer to a watershed plan that you would be trying to implement or have in your application. I would encourage you to refer to if you have a watershed plan that your practice will help implement, but it's not required.
All right. We'll wait about 10 seconds to see if anyone else has a question.
I will also share that the presentation we have this recording, but we've also made a recording of this presentation, and that will be made available online as well if you'd like to distribute it to other WMAs or other watershed groups that might be interested in the program, or you can just invite us to give the presentation again.
Great. Another question, will there be a limit on the number of projects that would be approved each year?
No.
Short answer. All right, any other questions? All right, seeing none, I want to thank Julie and Reagan and Ginger for being on the presentation today. And our next Lunch and Learn will be at the end of July, and more information will be emailed in the weeks to come. If you're not on the email list for these Lunch and Learns that are monthly, just shoot me an email and I will be happy to add you to that list. So thanks everyone, have a great day.